Hi, it's about 6 p.m. on Friday, February 20th, and I just got home from a hike with my eldest kid. I'm freezing cold. Hopefully my husband's going to come in with a hot water bottle. In our household, we call them Heißwasserflasche. I know that's not right. I realize it's Wärmflasche, but whatever. I'm super chilled, but I wanted to sit down and film this video because as soon as I got in the house, I opened up my comments and loads of people are like, could you please talk about the Supreme Court ruling from today? Actually, within 30 minutes of the Supreme Court ruling this morning, I had people in my comments being like, can you tell us what's going on here? And I just want to gently remind folks that there's probably 40 different subjects that I could cover in a day, and I am by no means a definitive voice on everything. I'm rarely a definitive voice on anything, and I really encourage y'all, especially if you want to hear about legal perspectives on Supreme Court rulings, you can follow my friend Brian ODC, who is a lawyer. He talks a lot about civics and constitutional law. And also on TikTok, my friend Attorney Di. They are very good at breaking down Supreme Court cases in particular. I'm also probably going to be referencing Attorney Ryan and Rachel Cohen in this video as well. So I definitely have opinions about the Supreme Court ruling this morning that struck down Donald Trump's tariffs. It was a big ruling, 6-3. I have a perspective here and I really want to share my thoughts, but I just want you to be aware that like I'm not an attorney. My area of expertise is permaculture, even though I yap about politics quite a bit. And so I hope that folks are searching out those attorneys. Oh, also Harry Litman from Talking Feds. I really respect his opinion. There are so many good attorneys who will do their, I'm going to give you one more, JJ Legal. So many good attorneys who are sharing breakdowns and perspectives if you want the nitty gritty of the case ruling itself. Okay, really quickly running through those again. Brian ODC, Attorney Di, JJ Legal, Attorney Ryan, Rachel Cohen, and Harry Litman of Talking Feds. Those are probably my go-to group of lawyers that I want to listen to if there is a ruling like the one today. I also want to gently remind folks that when there is a piece of breaking news, I rarely do a breaking news video. I always want to see how the story unfolds and provide more context. There are creators who do just like barf up the headlines of breaking news, and that's fine. They serve their purpose, but they rarely provide more context for the story. And also that initial headline can be really alarming, or it can kind of overstate the situation, and we need a little bit of time to pass and to get more information and more context before we can get a fully fleshed out picture. So I often like to wait a little bit before I talk about an issue. And it's a good thing that I did wait a little bit. If you want to see my kind of immediate reaction to breaking news, go follow me over on Blue Sky, because I did talk about this ruling this morning a little bit. So 6-3 ruling, where the dissenting justices were Kavanaugh and, surprise, surprise, Alito and Thomas, right? Chief Justice Roberts ruled with the majority, 6-3, stating that Donald Trump overstepped his authority when he ordered tariffs on imports in nearly like almost every country. He used this IEEPA statute to justify the slapping on and pulling off and totally stochastic application of tariffs, whatever his whims determined, right? He was going to slap a tariff on if it benefited his buddies and it benefited his own stock portfolio. He'd pull the tariff off, right? Creating this intentional, you could argue, intentional manipulation of the stock market and costing the American taxpayer a tremendous amount of money, because tariffs are a tax that is passed on to us, right? They're not paid by the countries who are importing goods. In fact, we know that the average American household has paid over $1,000 in tariffs in the last year. It's us, regular people, who are bearing the burden of Donald Trump's out of control, totally chaotic tariff scheme. It's not really a plan, whatever it is that he's doing. So in a 6-3 SCOTUS ruling, the court said, no, absolutely not. You can't do this. Okay, so what happened in this ruling today? Yes, Von Flasche. Okay, so what happened in this, thank you, honey. What happened in this ruling today is that Chief Justice John Roberts issued the opinion for the court in which he said the president asserts extraordinary power to unilaterally impose tariffs of unlimited amount, duration, and scope. In light of the breadth, history, and constitutional context of that asserted authority, he must identify clear congressional authorization to exercise it. IEEPA's grant of authority to, quote, regulate importation falls short. IEEPA contains no reference to tariffs or duties. This next part is really important, and I'm going to explain why in just a second. The government points to no statute in which Congress uses the word regulate to authorize taxation. And until now, no president has read IEPA to confer such power. We claim no special competence in matters of economics or foreign affairs. We claim only, as we must, the limited role assigned to us by Article 3 of the Constitution. Fulfilling that role, we hold that IEPA does not authorize the president to impose tariffs. Now, immediately in his dissenting opinion, Justice Kavanaugh was like, yeah, but maybe there's all these other ways that you could get around this and go ahead and issue tariffs however you want and act like a king and work around Congress and subvert their power. In his dissent, Kavanaugh also said the United States may be required to refund billions of dollars to importers who paid the IEPA tariffs, even though some importers may have already passed costs onto consumers or others. As was acknowledged at oral argument, the refund process is likely to be a mess. To which I replied, the average American household has paid more than $1,000 toward Donald Trump's tariffs, and we are likely never going to see that money. If this money has to be refunded to these corporations, they're not going to pass that money on to the consumer. And I have not seen any talk of issuing every household in America a check for $1,000. Haven't seen any of that. And also, of course, it's a mess. Donald Trump is making a mess of the entire country, of our economy, of the functionality of our government. Of course, everything he is doing is messing up the United States.
It's going to be a food fight going after $175 billion in it. So
I got a feeling the American people won't see it.
There we go. Once again, more graft, more corruption, more taking our taxpayer dollars and lining the pockets of billionaires and the Epstein class. Now, obviously, Donald Trump had this big crash out because narcissists cannot handle being told no. They cannot handle checks on their power. So Trump had this absolute meltdown today.
The Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs is deeply disappointing, and I'm ashamed of certain members of the court, absolutely ashamed, for not having the courage to do what's right for our country. I'd like to thank and congratulate Justices Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh. The Democrats on the court
There are no Democrats on the court.
but they will automatically vote no. They're an automatic no, just like in Congress. They're an automatic no. They're against anything that makes America strong, healthy, and great again. They also are a, frankly, disgrace to...
Again, that overproduction of saliva, that inability for him to control how like wet and slurry and slurpy his speech sounds. Classic dementia symptom. But that right there is what an aging would-be dictator with a narcissistic injury looks like. He's big mad. He's big mad. Right, and of course he's big mad because this is the Supreme Court that has been hell-bent on turning him into a monarch with their fringe unitary executive theory. The radical, uber-conservative, activist 6 justices have ruled in favor of Trump over and over again, clearing the pathway for him to functionally dismantle democracy and install himself as a dictator. And here, they're finally checking his power, and he's super butthurt over it. And before I talk more about Donald Trump's reaction and his next action, which is to issue an executive order, trying to be like, you can't stop me, I can go ahead and do a tariff if I want to. I want to talk about this ruling and how it shows that when the court wants to side with the Constitution and the people and the rule of law, it actually will do the right thing. When there's enough political pressure or enough pressure from corporations, right, who are not happy with Trump's tariffs, that the court will step in and be like, oh man, we meant for you to be a monarch, but like not like this, buddy. So they gave him all of this unchecked power because maybe they thought he would implement their radical Christo-fascist agenda. And it's not going well, especially because Donald Trump no longer has the support of the people. In fact, every poll since, what do they call it, Liberation Day? God, that's such a cringe term. Donald Trump has been underwater. He is increasingly unpopular. And SCOTUS, we like to think that they are immune to whatever is going on in the country in terms of politics, but they're really not, right? They see which way the wind is blowing. They see the fact that he's deeply unpopular and that the tide is turning against him. And they realize that an autocrat cannot cement their power without the support of the people. And so I think if I want to speculate from my totally lay position here, I think the court realized that like this is too much. This is not something that anybody is going to stand for. And also maybe they reached their own limit. Okay, we wanted to give him unconstrained power, but now he's not using it the way we want. Well, maybe we do need to actually constrain him a little bit. And he can't handle it. He's real mad. I think one of the most important takeaways here is that the Supreme Court can check Donald Trump's power anytime they want to. And honestly, so can Congress, right? The reason that Donald Trump has been allowed to do all of the shit that he's doing is because the other branches of government are failing to do their job, in particular, Republicans in Congress. That's why Donald Trump put these tariffs on, right? He tried to usurp, to take the power of Congress and try and claim it for himself and then see if he got away with it. And Congress let him get away with it, but the Supreme Court is not. And a lot of people say, well, Donald Trump can do whatever he wants and nobody can stop him. No, we see that when members of the other branches of government do their fucking job, that they actually can constrain him. They actually can stop him. It is because Republicans have failed every step of the way to do their job, and the uber conservative fringe six on SCOTUS have failed to do their job, that we have seen Donald Trump get this far. It is entirely because there are people complicit in the other two branches of government that the checks and balances have not been functioning. That is why myself, Amanda Nelson, a bunch of other creators say it is not really a Donald Trump problem that we have in this country. It's a Republicans in Congress problem. It truly is. And so when we look at the argument of like, well, Donald Trump can do whatever he wants. He can do anything and nobody can stop him. That's not true. That's not true. It's important that we uphold the rule of law. We must exercise our rights in order to protect them. We must insist that the rule of law be defended and upheld. That doesn't mean that Donald Trump and the fascists running the government are going to respect the rule of law. Of course not. They are intent on trampling and dismantling it every way that they can. They are trying to pocket and claim every single power for the president, for the executive. That's a given. Like that's who they are and what they're going to do. That is how authoritarians behave. As I always say, you have to expect fascists to do fascy shit. They're not like, an alligator is not going to become a teddy bear, right?
Been bipartisan criticism.
No, not bipartisan.
Of the tariffs.
Excuse me.
There's several
A few
Republicans
people.
have said that.
Yeah,
Well,
a
why
few people.
wouldn't you just work with Congress to come up with a plan?
I don't have to.
To push tariffs.
I have the
through?
right to do tariffs, and I've always had the right to do tariffs. And it's all been approved by Congress, so there's no reason to do it. All we're doing is we're going through a little bit more complicated process. Not complicated very much, but a little more complicated than what we had. We'll be able to take in tariffs, more tariffs. And the Congress people and the Congress,
down the Canadian tariffs last week.
Yeah,
There's
you-
been votes
you
in
know
the
why?
Senate against it.
Yeah, because we lost 2 Republicans or 3 Republicans because they're not good Republicans.
But that doesn't mean that we stop holding the line for democracy. It doesn't mean that we stop insisting that the law still exists and must be respected, right? And we understand that he's not going to be like, okay, I give up. If you're like, you can't do that. He's not going to be like, okay, I guess I'll stop. His whole purpose, everything he does is in pursuit of the goal of destroying democracy and protecting himself from going to prison, protect the Epstein files from being revealed, right? And continue to grift and graft off of this country, right? He functions in a certain way that is entirely known to us. And so when we say respect the rule of law, and he's like, no, I'm going to go ahead and try and trample on it. When the Supreme Court says, no, you can't issue these tariffs, we shouldn't expect him to be like, okay, guys. We should expect him to do exactly what he did today, which is immediately issue an executive order, trying to be like, I'm going to go ahead and do these tariffs. You just try and stop me. Yeah, fascists don't stop until we stop them. We have to look at incremental victories. We have to look at insisting upon the rule of law. We do not abandon the law. We must continue to insist that it be upheld. He's going to come back again and again and again, and we have to, our job is to say, nope, you don't cross this line. Nope, you're not going to be able to do this. And I think when we look at this executive order today, it's going to be more of that. Now, attorney Rachel Cohen was talking about how when you go argue in front of the Supreme Court, you bring your best legal case for why you should be allowed to do the thing that you're doing, right? They brought their best legal argument for why Donald Trump can unilaterally issue these tariffs and work around Congress. And the Supreme Court was like, that's the best you got? That's not enough. No, you can't do that. And so while Trump apologists and Republicans and doomers are all like, see, he's just going to go around, he's just going to do a workaround. Functionally, that's not true. I anticipate that if we all insist that the law and the ruling be upheld, we can go ahead and constrain him again. We can go ahead and stop him again. But you have to understand that he's going to keep trying to break the law. He's going to keep trying to get his way. He doesn't understand a world in which he is told no, and he respects that no. That's not how malignant narcissists operate. So I'm actually not freaked out by the fact that he issued an executive order today insisting that he gets to go ahead and put 10% tariffs all across the world and nobody can stop him. It's not that nobody can stop him. If nobody tries to stop him, he will not be stopped. And that's why we have a resistance movement, right? That's why we insist that our rights be upheld and the law be respected, because it actually requires people stopping him. It requires a mass movement of the people. It requires members of Congress and the judicial to do their jobs and stop him, because otherwise he won't stop on his own.
Therefore, effective immediately, all national security tariffs under Section 232 and existing Section 301 tariffs, they're existing, they're there, remain in place, fully in place, and in full force and effect. Today, I will sign an order to impose a 10% global tariff under Section 122 over and above our normal tariffs already being charged. And we're also initiating several Section 301 and other investigations to protect our country from unfair trading practices of other countries and companies.
Oh my God, the dementia spittle was just flying in that clip. Let me read what NPR had to say about this new executive order trying to put 10% tariffs. Okay, so they say, hours after the Supreme Court decision, Trump said he planned to impose a worldwide tariff of 10% using Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, which is designed to address trade deficits. But under that statute, he can only impose those for 150 days. Likewise, Section 301 of the 1974 Trade Act or Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 allow the president to impose tariffs, but only after a fact finding by the U.S. Trade Representative and the Commerce Department, respectively. Those haven't been done. And this is just Donald Trump's desperate attempt, because he's big mad, to say, you can't stop me. It's a stomp his foot, have a temper tantrum, right? This is his way to try and assert he's big and powerful, but he effectively got smacked down by SCOTUS. And these are not the same thing as what SCOTUS ruled against. And also, again, Rachel Cohen said, you got to bring your best argument. Bring your best argument to SCOTUS. They didn't try and argue Section 122 or Section 232 or Section 301. They tried to argue IEPA as their best possible case for Donald Trump being able to act like a monarch. And SCOTUS said, no, absolutely not. Now, two other things here really quickly. One is that Donald Trump's tariffs are deeply unpopular. Nobody likes these, right? Not only are they chaotic, stochastic, they don't make sense, they are based on his whims, who has pissed him off in the moment, or something he saw on Fox News before he dozed off, right? They don't make any sense economically. Manufacturing doesn't like it. And his argument that it would bring manufacturing to the U.S. is simply not true. Slapping on these tariffs was never going to bring domestic manufacturing back to the United States. Not only is that not how that works, there's no infrastructure, there's no incentive, there's no planning to create jobs here in the U.S. That was never the point of the tariffs. And as NPR said, Trump promised that imposing the highest tariffs since the Great Depression would somehow spark a renaissance of the U.S. manufacturing market. But factories have been in a slump for all of last year, shedding 108,000 jobs during Donald Trump's first year of his second term. According to an unnamed factory manager at the Institute for Supply Management, morale is very low across manufacturing in general. The cost of living is very high and component costs are increasing, with folks citing tariffs and other price increases. And let me say here at the end, Kavanaugh and also Amy Coney Barrett and also members of the Trump regime are trying to argue, like, gosh, reimbursing the American people for having to pay $1,000 each in tariffs over the last year because Donald Trump has been allowed to operate unconstrained by Congress, that would be too messy. That would be too difficult. That money is never going to come back to us, the American taxpayer. It's going to go right into if they do reimbursements, it's going to go to these corporations that are going to pocket it. And these corporations are never going to bring prices back down. They're going to keep those prices high. They're going to graft, right? All of our taxpayer money is going to go to these big corporations, the Epstein class, and it's not going to come back to us. According to veteran tariff lawyer Robert Leo, the process would be a little bit cumbersome, but not impossible. That's because tariff bills are computerized, so it would be relatively straightforward to identify which payments are eligible for refunds. And honestly, there's no reason that we can't have Congress pass a bill saying that that refund comes directly to us, right? That we each get just like a stimulus check, right? Except it's a reimbursement check for Donald Trump dicking us all around for the last year. We all get a check for $1,000. I personally am very pleased with this ruling. I'm not freaked out by this executive order. I don't think that you should be either. I think Donald Trump is real freaked out. He's real mad, right? And I hope it gets his blood pressure up a lot.
Tariffs have likewise been used to end 5 of the 8 wars that I settled. I settled 8 wars, whether you like it or not, including India, Pakistan, big ones, nuclear, could have been nuclear. Prime Minister of Pakistan said yesterday at the great meeting that we had, the Peace Board, he said yesterday that President Trump could have saved 35 million lives by getting us to stop fighting. They were getting ready to do some bad things.
I don't know, so what do you think about John Roberts ruling with the majority? What do you think about Donald Trump's meltdown and subsequent EO? What do you think is going to happen next? Do you feel like things are going well for Donald Trump and his takeover of the United States? Or do you feel like he's riding the struggle bus a little bit? And how can we help him ride the struggle bus a lot more? By the way, if you're not signed up for No Kings Day, March 28th, nokings.org, sign up.